Welcome to Overflow of the Heart. Today we're back in Matthew chapter 1, learning about Jesus' family tree in the way that Matthew describes it. Today we're going to finish up the first 14 generations that Matthew depicts in Jesus' family tree. So let's begin in chapter 1, verses 4 through 6. Nashon was the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse was the father of King David. This part of the genealogy talks a lot about the women that Matthew chose to include. This is significant because at that time frame, women are not included in genealogy. It was all passed down through the fathers. But Matthew decided that these women needed to have their stories told. Just like we learned in the last video that Tamar was significant because of how she helped hold Judah accountable, these women also hold significance in the family tree. So let's start with Rahab. So who is Rahab? To understand her story, you have to know a little bit of the history. So the Israelites, Abraham's descendants, left Egypt and were in the wilderness for many years. Finally, God told Joshua, who was leading them, that it was time for them to move to the promised land. So they came to the first city they were going to conquer, Jericho. Joshua sent 2 spies into the city, but the city turned against them. They ended up hiding in the house of a prostitute. She hid them on the roof, and then when the town people left, she let them down the wall in a basket. So then, when the Israelites attacked Jericho and God helped them destroy the city and the walls came down, the prostitute and her family were saved. That prostitute was Rahab. And Rahab married Salmon and became a part of the genealogy of Jesus. Now, Rahab was a Canaanite who God had said should all be destroyed. But he made an exception for her because of her loyalty to the spies and her character. And then Matthew chooses to make sure she's added into the genealogy because he's looking at her character and her heart. Rahab and Salmon have a son named Boaz. Now Boaz is described as an upright guy. He marries a widow by the name of Ruth. And Ruth is another woman that Matthew includes in the genealogy of Christ. So let's hear Ruth's story. Ruth, like Rahab, was not an Israelite, but she married into an Israelite family. Unfortunately, her father-in-law, her brother-in-law, and her own husband pass away. After this, her mother-in-law, Naomi, decides that she's going to go back home to live with her family. She encourages Ruth to go back to live with her family instead of coming with her. But Ruth is dedicated to Naomi, and she says this: "I will go where you go. I will stay where you stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May God deal with me severely if even death separates us." After this heartfelt decision, both ladies return to Naomi's home. While they're there, they're struggling to survive. So Ruth goes out into the field and gathers food behind the harvesters. While she's there, Boaz notices her. He makes sure that she gets food and tells his workers to protect her. When Naomi hears about this, she teaches Ruth how to get Boaz's attention. She tells her to go to Boaz and ask if he will be their guardian redeemer and redeem the land that is owed to Naomi. So Ruth goes in the middle of the night to Boaz and asks this. He agrees that he would be the redeemer. So Boaz marries Ruth, claims the land for Naomi, and takes care of both of them for the rest of their lives. Ruth is another example of a non-Israelite with amazing character who stands by and is loyal and is included in the genealogy of Jesus. Matthew saw what was important in Ruth. Boaz and Ruth have a son named Obed. Obed has a son named Jesse, and Jesse has a son named David. Now this David, when he was young, was a shepherd. He's described in the Bible as glowing with health, handsome, and a fine appearance. This is the same David that as a young man went up against the giant Goliath and killed him with just a sling and a stone because he was trash-talking God. This is the same David who could play the harp and wrote the majority of the Psalms in the Bible. He loved music. He loved to worship God. He even has a story where he danced in his underwear in the streets while he was worshiping God. He was a mighty warrior. He led to peace in the land, and he was anointed by God as the second king of Israel. But even with these amazing accolades, David also made mistakes. The next woman mentioned in the genealogy emphasizes one of these mistakes. It's listed as the wife of Uriah, but we know her as Bathsheba. Here's her story. Bathsheba was bathing on her roof of her house, and King David's in the castle and happens to see her. So he calls for her and has her come, and they make love, and he sends her home. She later sends him a note saying that she is pregnant. So instead of owning up to what he did, he calls her husband back from the war and tries to convince him to go stay with his wife. But Uriah, who is an honorable man, refuses to go be with his wife while his soldiers are on the front line. So David gives Uriah a letter to go back to the sergeant that says, make sure you put Uriah at the front line and retreat so that he will die. Uriah takes the letter, goes back to war, and is murdered. Then David takes Bathsheba to be his wife. Obviously, a huge mistake. God sends a prophet to call David out on this mistake. And they end up, the son from Bathsheba and David dies. So let's take a second and look at that story from the perspective of Bathsheba. She's at her house. She gets called by the king. She does what the king orders her to do. She finds out she's pregnant. And then her husband's murdered. She's taken to be a wife of the king. And then she loses her son. But even through all of this, God still sees her. He lets her to be able to give birth to another son who will become the descendant of David that carries on the genealogy to Jesus. So even through the hardships that she bared, God helped to bring her up and glorify her. These are the women that Matthew wanted to include in the genealogy. He broke tradition so that we would know their names and remember their stories and how they led to the birth of Jesus. The first is Leah, the sister who was unloved as a wife from Jacob, but God did love her. He gave her many sons and blessed her. The second was Tamar, who was forgotten by Judah, but God remembered her and blessed her with twins, one who carried on the line of Jesus. Third was Rahab, who's an unlikely addition to the genealogy, but she was accepted and loved by God, and she was saved from certain destruction. Fourth is Ruth, who was abandoned by her husband, but who remained loyal to God and her mother-in-law, and who was redeemed by Boaz. And then lastly, the wife of Uriah, Bathsheba, who was mistreated, but then later honored with being the mother of Solomon. What we can learn from these 5 women that Matthew includes in the genealogy is that God sees us. He loves us, He saves us, redeems us, and honors us. He wants to make sure that He's taking care of us now and in the future, and that He has a bigger plan for our lives. I'm so thankful that we have a Savior that we can trust in every day, for every step, because we know the path He has us on is to love us and honor us, and that He truly sees us. Hope you guys have a great day. I love you.